Hey guys, I'm back Khanvolution. My name's Khan, and right now I'm actually going to be sitting down to discuss my experience with reading the first Wheel of Time book, The Eye of the World. I promised you guys I would go into it after finishing season 1, which by the way, if you guys haven't checked out my reactions to season 1 of The Wheel of Time, episodes 1 through 8, links down in the description below, as well as the peers, you guys can go and check that out. But for joining back with me, I am so glad I got into the Wheel of Time series. You guys like in the comments for all my videos thus far really like edge me on into like, you know, the world building aspects, the magic system, the diversity of the characters that's in this series, and just in, like, the terms of personality and just opinions and like power sets and all that stuff. You guys are very adamant about, like, you know, how crazy this series is. And after having read the first book, and actually before I jump into my thoughts on it, I'm going to be doing a little bit of comparison of the first book with the first season of the show, as well as my thoughts on just the book itself in terms of just like story elements, characters, and of course relationships to, like, in terms of, you know, adaptation for future potential, simply because I did jump into the second book already, The Great Hunt. I'm halfway through. For those of you guys who want to know exactly where I am reading in The Great Hunt, like where I am exactly, I'm at a point where Rand and Loyal are in this sort of like weird dimensional space, and they've come across this this crazy beautiful chick named Celine. So that's where I am right now. But I've gone through that much. But why it took me a while to jump into this review is because I went through the first book, The Eye of the World, which is like about 700 pages, and then I jumped into the graphic novel. There's for those of you guys don't know, if you guys are Wheel of Time fans, of course you guys know, but there's this graphic novel, right? It's like a comic for the first book, The Eye of the World, right? So I jumped into that, and my god, if anybody who wants to jump back into reading The Eye of the World, I highly recommend, because what I did is that I went through the graphic novel, all like 24 or 25 volumes, I can't remember how many, and then I also had the audiobook playing at the same time. The comic matches the books almost like 90%. You know, the comic skips a little bit of content, but if you follow it, it's like a huge graphic video audio novel experience, man. Like, trust me, go try it. The audio, have the audiobook on, and then go through the graphic novel as you go. You know, go through the comic. It's a beautiful experience, and I absolutely loved it. So that's why it took me a while to actually jump into this review, because not only did I read the first novel, I jumped into the graphic novel right afterwards, and then I started The Great Hunt a little bit afterwards as well. So the first book, holy crap, it is really good. It is really good. It's very much a fellowship type of book, and what I mean by fellowship, I don't mean any reference to Lord of the Rings. I just mean in terms of it's an adventure story. For a vast majority of, actually pretty much 100% of this story, outside from the first couple of chapters where we mainly get situated with the characters, learn who they are, what their family structures are like, and you know, what the village is like. Because the Amon's Field, the Two Rivers, that whole area is pretty much, you know, where we spend a good chunk of time, at least in the books, whereas in the show we only spend like one episode of it, you know what I'm saying, which is, you know, understandable, because there's a whole lot of content to get through. The adventure needs to start, and boy, it starts in a pretty awesome way in the show, I think. But in the series, it's very much a slow build. You see things happen over time. The biggest change from the series is that the series focuses on, you know, all the different characters bit by bit, and it doesn't really show you who the Dragon Reborn is. There's no, you know, you don't really have that much of a clue as to who the Dragon Reborn is. It's more of a mystery. It's open to the air for assumption. But in the book, you pretty much know who it is. The first book is pretty much all throughout Rand's perspective. So how is he not the Dragon Reborn? You know what I'm saying? And also at the same time, the show pretty much turned the Dragon Reborn into a character that could be reincarnated as both man and woman. However, in the books, it's clearly, you know, the Dragon Reborn was reborn in as a male. You know, you can't really be born as a female if you're a man in the previous existence. The gender dynamic is sort of much more stricter within the books in terms of the reincarnation within the cyclical nature of the Wheel of Time as you process through the ages. I don't think they actually delved into, they'll probably delve into greater detail in the future books, but one thing I was looking for is much greater detail as to explaining, are souls recycled within the various ages, or is it possible for a soul to resurface within the same age? You know what I'm saying? Because the Dragon Reborn, I don't think there's a Dragon Reborn in between Rand and Lews Therin Telamon, which, by the way, the book starts off with this incredible prologue, a part of which we saw in those little segmented animated shorts that Amazon Prime has. We see a little bit of that, Lews Therin like going around all mad, but in the books it's done so much better because you see Lews Therin, and I believe the person who is like the antagonist to him in that specific scene is Baalzamon or Shamael specifically, and he basically comes in and sort of ridicules Lews for his his mental instability, and then finally reveals to him the true nature of what he's done. He's pretty much destroyed his whole household, killed his wife, his kids, his pretty much whole legacy is down for the rot. Meanwhile, the breaking of the world is still taking place in various areas throughout the planet, and the men are just going completely and utterly insane. In the first book, they don't talk about the madness a whole lot. It's sort of alluding to the fact that Rand has this power inside of him and he uses it every now and then, so we know that he's a dragon reborn, but the concept of the madness is a little bit like it's sprinkled in. It's not like, hey, here's some exposition, now figure it out. It's more like sprinkled throughout the story little bit by bit, and you sort of have to piece the pieces together, you know what I'm saying? And I like that a lot more. The advantage of the book is it has a lot of pages to describe that information and build that up, whereas in the show they sort of have to give you the exposition because they don't have a whole lot of time to explain all this detail to you, because they did change a lot of the stuff up. And one of the changes really being is that they got rid of this incredible prologue, which I hope they eventually bring back for future seasons. I hope they start it, because they did a little bit, they did pay a little bit of homage to the prologue, where they showed at the end of season 8, they showed Lews Therin Telamon having that conversation with the Caemlyn seat, but although that scene was great and it kind of displayed the sort of majesty of the Age of Legends, the crazy age where technology was so advanced, and Aes Sedai were so much more stronger at that time. Getting back to the prologue, I wish that they had that in there, showing Lews Therin Telamon, showing his madness, and then that would have been such a great way to introduce the universe or the world of the Wheel of Time into the show, showing this tragic hero of an ancient time, and just all the suffering he has to endure so much that he bear to live anymore, and he just he unleashes the one power and literally turns himself into a freaking mountain, man. That's so freaking crazy. It's insane. The book is insane, man. Anyways, and then we immediately jump into Rand's perspective, and one thing that's different in the books, which is a major difference in the show, is that once again there's only 3 ta'veren. There's Rand, Mat, and Perrin, and that's very early specified because the Trollocs don't attack the whole village. They mainly target Rand's house, Mat's house, and Perrin's house because they're after the ta'veren specifically. Egwene and Nynaeve are technically not ta'veren. They're just 1 in 1,000 or million incredibly strong, channelers, or the potential to become amazingly strong channelers, which in the early segments of the Great Hunt book, they actually go to the Tar Valon to begin their training. Another big difference is that, I was surprised that Tom Merrilin was in the Two Rivers, was in Aemon's Field in the beginning. He was there doing performances, doing shows, doing his Gleeman stuff, and the way Tom is described in terms of physical appearance, I'll go into physical appearance right after this, but Tom is already there displaying, all his musical talents, his performances, and it's very different from the way that Tom Merrilin was displayed in the TV show, which they made him more like a hip, old school, a rowdy guitarist sort of fella, and he's not even wearing his patchwork of colored, the Gleeman outfit that he has in the novel. So it's a very different interpretation of the character. And I sort of understand why they brought him in later, because there's already a huge group traveling together, and you need a time for each character to have their own unique moments to build connection with the audience, which is not possible if you have an incredibly large cast traveling together. I think what they wanted to do is give Mat and Perrin a little bit more screen time, and sort of displaying their characters a little bit more, as far as rather than focusing more on an additional character such as, say, Tom. I'd rather introduce him later. And I do hope Tom gets more screen time in the future seasons. He's a cool character. I don't think he's dead. I don't think he's dead at all. I don't think Tom's dead whatsoever. It's just a weird way for him to go. And the way he went in the book series is pretty much sort of the similar way he went, like fighting against a Fade. Which, by the way, the Fades are described as much more menacing in the books. Like, okay, so here's the thing about the books. The books describe things in such a more vibrant way, you know, because it transforms. Whenever you read something, it's always going to be better inside your mind, simply because you're developing it into, like, you're taking the words and interpreting them in your own way, and the vision you create in your mind will always be better than the what's crafted through, you know, directors or animators or whatever in reality. So the Fades in the show are very much drawn to be like these sort of, if you guys have seen like the mouth of Sauron from Lord of the Rings, like it almost looks like a mixture between a Nazgul and the mouth of Sauron characters. Like, they don't really have eyes, but the way they describe them in books is they call them like half men. They're called Fades, they're called Myrdal. They're all very menacing, evil, and just exuding this air of like fear and, you know, almost disgust, you know. Or like when there's this part in the book where they're describing a Fade, and it's like the moment it shows up, people can literally feel it in their skin, you know, and that's just crazy. And like Trollocs, the Trollocs in the show look very much like orcs with horns, and, you know, kind of like Fae if they were like transformed in like a Uruk-hai way, you know, they look like freaking Uruk-hai. But in the books, they very much look like if men were transformed into horrendous beasts. Like, they have like beaks, they have like, you know, pig snouts, and like weird, they look like chimeras basically, at least in my mind they did. So there's a little bit of visual changes in there as well. I think in the show they did a really good job of just showing what Aemon's Field and like the Two Rivers looks like. I think the setting looks beautiful. I think the show's depiction of the village was much better than in the books, because in the books, the way that they described it, it's very much like just pure farmland, you know. I think of like mud, I think of humidity, a lot of rain, you know, and a lot of like grasslands and prairies and that kind of stuff. But in the show, they made it feel more like habitable, I guess, made it a little bit more cleaner. I've been to villages before. I know what it's like, you know. So it felt much more, I guess, you know, pretty, you know, beautified in that sense. But I understand why they did that. So Matt, Perrin, and Ren are the first ones to actually see a Fade before they encounter it later. I love the way that in the show they showed, I think the attack on Ren's house, although it was like much shortened in comparison to what was described in the books, it's still like played out in the same way. And I loved how they introduced that segment of, you know, Tam having that sort of hallucination moment right after he got stabbed by the Trolloc in the woods. I liked how they brought that back in episode 6, because it was a really cool way of revealing that Rand was a dragon reborn. Who's my favorite character in the Wheel of Time series? Obviously Rand. I love that I fell in love with the Rand character at the end of my season 1 experience, and then I realized, holy shit, the whole first book is through Rand's perspective. It was absolutely incredible. I love that thing. And I think the actor let's talk about the actors, you know. I think the casting for the Wheel of Time series is awesome. I do have a few nitpicks, because I'm the type of person who's very nitpicky about the race of the characters in my fantasy novels. I'm very nitpicky about the genders in of the characters in my fantasy novels. I don't really like it when the characters the way that they're shown in the books, if the books describe a character as, you know, not having any gender specific or ethnicity specific role attached to them, or like, you know, the way they look like specifically described, it's open for interpretation. Anybody can, you know, in any adaptation, can take the characters however way they want it, you know. If you don't know what the skin color is, make them a white guy, make them a black guy, but make sure their characters play in tune with all the personality features that are described within the original work itself by the author who made them, right? That's perfectly fine. However, if their facial features are very well described and like pretty much pointed out multiple times within the novel itself, whereas the vast majority of fans already have a picture in their mind of what these characters look like, and it fits for the vast majority of times, then I think it's the duty of the TV series adapters to actually hold true to that. And I think for the most part in the Wheel of Time series, they've been able to do that, but I will say that there's some that they just like, I think they just go off the rails. For example, I love the character of Rand, and I think I don't know all the character actors' names, forgive me, but I think the actor for Rand, it looks perfect in my mind. He is Rand, and when I read the books after watching the show, his face was what was in my mind the whole time when I was reading the books, so I think they picked a great actor to play Rand, and I actually like the actor for Rand just a little bit more than his counterpart in the books. It feels more like Rand's coming into his own in the Great Hunt, but in the first book it's more like we're being exposed to the world throughout him, and he still has his own personality features and whatnot. I just feel like the character of Rand in the show is a little bit more prolific, and like a little bit more exudes a little bit more charisma and personality, especially definitely with his relationship with Nynaeve, which is pretty much non-existent in the first book. Yeah, they have a little bit of romance, but nowhere near to the degree that is displayed in the TV series. I think the casting for Nynaeve is really well done. All the cast members are aged up, which makes sense. I think Egwene looks perfect, almost near perfect. I think Matt is well done, although I don't like the fact that Matt or Perrin have beards, because they're still, I still want them, even though they're older people. I think it's important to show that they maintain like a youthfulness. But yeah, Matt looks considerably older, and I always pictured Matt as like a very like skinniest of the bunch. Like now they have a new actor for Matt, which you guys let me know, and he looks just like Matt, how I would imagine Matt as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing him in season 2. I think Moiraine, all the Aes Sedai actresses in general, they aged up, whereas in the books the Aes Sedai have, like the way Rand describes it, is like this sort of ageless beauty to them. Like you don't really know what age demographic they fall into, except they're just very youthful looking, so I imagine like they're in this like perfect icicle period of like mid to late 20s. They look perfect, they're like almost like fashion models kind of looking sort of women. Like they have very few imperfections, and Moiraine is like sort of the pinnacle of that. The way I imagine Moiraine in my head when I'm reading the books isn't the way I would picture Rosamund Pike. I mean, nothing against Rosamund Pike, she's a beautiful actress, but it's just like the actresses that they chose for the Aes Sedai are definitely 30 plus demographic, let's say that. But yeah, so nothing wrong with that. I have nothing wrong with it. It actually makes a little bit more sense, since they're supposed to be more aged, these sort of hermit-like individuals, especially the Blue Aja members. We do see a couple of more Ajas in this first book, but not nearly to the degree we see it like in the series. You know what I'm saying? I love the actor for Lan in the series, but the way I pictured Lan in the books is much more aged character, like has more gray in his hair. The actor for Lan, I think he's like obviously he's like 40 plus, but he definitely doesn't look it. When I see him, I think of like he looks very young. Let's say whatever he's doing well. When I think of Lan, I think of like an Asian actor, like somebody and maybe that's partly due to already having seen the actor for Lan in the series, but I don't know. The seven Towers of Malkier, like the whole race dynamic in the Wheel of Time is very like skewed, because there's all these different characters that could potentially be different races, but for the vast majority of the Wheel of Time series, I imagined characters that would have popped out from like medieval European fantasy, so mostly white people. The book did describe like Egwene and Nynaeve's like skin features to be slightly a little bit darker, so I think they got the casting for that right. For the one casting that I really had the worst time getting my head around is Perrin. I don't think Perrin looks anything like the way I imagined him in the books. Like in my mind, I thought of Perrin as like having like longer hair, and I pictured Perrin as more of like a really burly looking Brazilian, but definitely Matt and Perrin shorter than Rand, because the books, they talk about this every single time when we see Rand. Rand is like the tallest mofo in the building, you know what I'm saying? And I guess that has to do with his Aiel heritage, which we don't really dive into that much in the first book, and the way that they at least go into in the series, that they really delve into. I thought Loyal looked very different though. Loyal in the books is sort of described as having these weird, crazy, like black eyebrows that like go all the way down his face, and I thought the nose that they did for Loyal was really well done, but the size obviously they can't do in the series. Loyal is supposed to be like 10 feet tall or some shit, but like in the show he's barely like six, like he looks like he's just a foot above Rand, you know what I'm saying? Which I saw what the actor looks like, and I'm glad that he's playing Loial. I think Loial's the book describes Loial's voice as having this sort of beehive thundering sort of effect, and that's perfect. Like the way they describe his voice in the show is perfect. That's exactly how I imagined it when I went and read the books for the first time. It's like, yeah, that's exactly it. Beehive thundering voice. That's exactly what it is. It's hard to say what the other Aes Sedai, what I should think about their casting, since I really haven't met them. Well, actually, in the first few chapters of The Great Hunt, we do get to see Swan Sanche. Although the Swan and Moiraine's character relationship is more of a friendship rather than, you know, actual romantic relationship. But Swan Sanche talks a whole lot of like fish talk, which I guess in the first season they sort of talked about, like they showed how she came from a fisherman family. So she talks like, whenever she talks, has these like, she uses like fish like jargon. You know what I'm saying? It's just like she talks about like pikes and netting and like waves, and like it's very funny when she talks, you know. But the way the books describe Swan Sanche's character is very much like, I thought of her as more of like an islander sort of character, you know, more of like an islander ethnicity, or like even in my mind I thought of like a Filipino actress or something like that, you know. So but I know it's not going to be 100%. I think the actress that they got for Swan Sanche is perfect, you know. She's an incredible actress. If you guys haven't seen the Death on the Nile, she's in that movie and she's fantastic. One of my favorite characters in that movie. I think Tam's character being Roose Bolton is absolutely fantastic. One thing I was very disappointed by though in the show, it's funny how like I love the show, but at the same time, the more I read the book, the more I became disappointed at the show for excluding certain scenes. And the main thing which I do not understand is, why did they end up going to Tar Valon instead of going to Caemlyn first? Because I loved that thing. I loved the chapters we spent at Caemlyn. I thought that was that was my favorite part of the book, is just spending time at Caemlyn, because we get to meet some pretty cool characters. Because Rand sort of goes off on his own, ends up in the royal palace of the Queen of Andor, and meets her like children. Like the princess is named Elaine Trekand, and the brother's name is Gawain Trekand or Gwaine. I don't know. I have to remember their names, but they show up later in the Great Hunt as well, because Elaine ends up going to Tar Valon to begin her training with Egwene and Nynaeve. I loved her character. She was like, her character felt so anime to me, you know? It's like, it's so anime when the Rand is just like looking at, you know, what they call freaking Logain traversing in, being escorted by a shit ton of Aes Sedai, and he's just looking at a parade and he trips and he lands, and then there's this beautiful hot princess chick looking down at him. It's so anime, man. I freaking love it. And his brother and her brother's right there, and Rand's like, what's going on? And he has like, you know, he was injured, so he has like a bandage wrapped around his head and shit, and he's just literally being dragged by Elaine and go sees the freaking queen and her attendant Aes Sedai, and everybody's like, oh maybe he's a spy, or maybe he did some shit, or we should arrest his ass. And Elaine's like, no, he's a friend I just made right now, just let him go. And you know, the queen's like, you know, judging him, you know, he seems like a pretty cool dude. And meanwhile Rand's just like, what the fuck just happened? Who am I? What am I? Where am I? It's freaking hilarious ass scene, and I would have loved to see that. I hope at the beginning of season 2, Rand's off on his own, which is very different from the books. I'll get into that, but I hope Rand like wanders into Caemlyn, has that sort of moment in the first episode with Elaine and meets them and shit. I would love to see that. But anyways, they described like, you know, Matt's character a little bit more, made him seem more human, giving him like, you know, giving him this like weird family drama, which is not really present within the books. You know, we see his 2 little sisters, which he does have, describing his father as like this sort of like, you know, playboy dude who doesn't, which in the books his father doesn't really come off as that. His father is very much more responsibly drawn in the books, and that was a big surprise. The biggest was like, holy shit, Perrin doesn't even have a wife in the books, you know. So he's still a little kid. He's just working as a blacksmith. I mean, he's not a little kid, but he's like a teenager. He's working as a blacksmith, trying to improve his craft. And Egwene and Nynaeve joins a lot later, but like Egwene sort of Egwene doesn't join them because she's, a candidate for being the Dragon Reborn, or a Ta'veren for that matter. She's just a really good channeler, which Moraine picks up on, and she just wants to leave, the Two Rivers. When I first read it, I'm like, okay, well, the show kind of did it better because they gave the Egwene a reason to go. But once I thought about it a little bit, I'm like, okay, Egwene wants to leave these two rivers. She doesn't want to be, held back. And yeah, okay, yeah, let's go. It made more sense. Egwene's the sort of adventure seeker. She wants to improve her ability. She just doesn't want to stay in this one small village for the rest of her life. She has this greater desire to go out, seek adventure and learn more about herself and this power that she has, and I think that's a great motivation, and I think that her character in the series does portray a little bit of that, even though it's mixed in with this potential of her being the Dragon Reborn, which her being a Ta'veren doesn't really bother me all that much, especially since we're focusing so much attention to her and Nynaeve's character in the second book as well, so it seems like they're going to be very important, so why not make them Ta'veren in the show? That's not a big deal to me. I do love the fact that Loial, like, whenever like the scene gets very intense, Loial just has this moment where he's just like, Ta'veren, Ta'veren. Like, that should be a meme. Loial saying Ta'veren should just be a freaking meme. So those are my thoughts on the characters and the way that they're portrayed. But what about some of the scenes? I think that the book does such a wonderful job at just depicting like the visuals of some of the scenery that's out there, the way the grass looks, the way that the mountains looks. I think that's beautifully drawn in the show as well, but the horror elements of it, the Trollocs marching in tandem, which the show I think replicated really well. But like, for example, when they're in Shadar Lagat, it's like the way that the darkness creeps on them, the evil and malice that exists within that vile city, it's described so much more intensely in the books. Like, it's this, almost like gaseous, poisonous, blackish fume that's encapsulating you, and it really freaked me out when I was reading it at night. You know what I'm saying? So, and I think they did their best in terms of showing it in the series, but they did it very quickly. Whereas in the books, you spent more time with it. And it's freaking Matt. Matt is pretty much sick throughout the entire episode because he steals that dagger, which, by the way, it was weird in Shadar Lagat, like when you're reading it and there's suddenly this dude shows up and like it's like eggs them on, and Matt and Rand go up to like, to find like this place filled with treasure, and Matt ends up stealing the knife, and then turns out he's he's not what he says he is. Obviously this crazy ass bald mofo. I like the way that they describe certain features, like the Trollocs even feel more menacing, the Murdaugh look more menacing, and obviously the whole Shadar Lagat scene is much more evil and violent. It literally gave me goosebumps while reading it. So the descriptive features in the book, well, you can't mimic them 100% in the show, but I think they did their best with what they could. Same thing with the ways. The way they describe the ways in the books is you literally can't see your hand in front of your eyes. Like, it absorbs the light. The darkness literally absorbs the light like a black hole. You know what I'm saying? It felt much more menacing. Whereas in the show, obviously, for people's sake, like even when I was watching episode, episode 7, when I was watching the ways, I was like, man, I can't see shit. Like, you can't see shit, and you have like lightning sort of illuminating a little bit. I understand that you have to have that sort of visual quality to it because most people want to see stuff happen. They don't want to be lingering in the darkness for too long. Even like, for example, in the Lord of the Rings, the Mines of Moria, it's dark AF, but you have to like give this sort of bluish tint and hue to it so people can actually see what the F is going on. So I don't blame them for that, but I just wish we would have spent much more time in the ways to give it this much more menacing feel. But most of the first book is mainly just traveling, going to different locations, especially when they split up. Rand and Matt, like, there's a scene in episode 3, I believe, when they're split up and Rand and Matt have this instance where they meet a dark friend, right? That was very much shortened up. They went to several villages and towns where dark friends just whooped their asses, like they were chasing them the non-stop. Men and women who just came up and they're like, should we trust this mofo? Oops, no, they're fucking dark friends. You know what I'm saying? Let's run our asses, and meanwhile Matt's just getting sicker and sicker and sicker, and you're just wondering like, oh god, is this fool ever gonna heal himself? So Matt's character isn't really delved into too much. We do spend a little bit of time with Perrin's character, and we get a little bit more explanation, which I didn't get at all in the books, is what is the deal with Perrin's eyes and his connection to these wolves, which we get through this introduction of a character named Ilias, which I hope they introduce in season 2, because they didn't include him at all. Instead, they just had this weird connection with Perrin with wolves, and we don't really understand. And then they meet the Tuathon, which they do meet in the books, and they stay with for a considerable amount of time. But it's mostly Perrin's journey in the first book is mainly his story with Ilias, learning about, you know, this connection that he has with wolves, or he develops with wolves, and how his relationship is to like a being such as Ilias, who has a power that's very different from that of the Aes Sedai, and what the Aes Sedai actually, you know, sort of fear about him, and, you know, don't really like very much in these sort of individuals. And because this is a power that existed long before the power that Perrin sort of has. Even I don't understand it all that well in the first book. I'm sure they'll dive into it more in the next book, but, you know, it's kind of like a warger in Game of Thrones, but a little bit more intense, you know what I'm saying? Perrin and Egwene traveling with Ilias, and then to Tuathon, and then they separate again, and then they get captured by White Cloaks, which the TV show spends so much more time on the White Cloaks themselves. Holy shit. Like the episode 2 started off with that crazy child Valda, and we see White Cloaks in the show, but it's more the White Cloaks serve as more of a purpose of showing, you know, the different sects of the religions out there that serve the light, and the different extremes that are out there in that sort of belief. The White Cloaks didn't really come off as menacing to me in the books as they did in the show, because in the show they just show them literally killing Aes Sedai, mainly through Child Valda, and that sort of like weird rapey scene that they have with Egwene in that show, which it wasn't necessary at all. But I guess it was just to show that the White Cloaks are really stupid assholes. But and then Perrin actually ends up, you know, killing a couple of them, and that sort of plays into his sort of berserker like nature, and his sort of character development when he sees like what his anger is capable of. Because Perrin has this constant struggle of, like, you know, in the books he's like, oh, he feels more wolf-like the more he gives into his like you know, basic instinct, his beast-like instincts. And then he meets the Tuathon, which like the Tuathon have like this, you know, this code of non-violence, this ethics about them. So he has this sort of dual complex that Perrin has to constantly battle with. Meanwhile, Egwene's just sort of along for the ride. Nynaeve in the book came off as very much like a bossy character. Every time she was on screen, I'm like, why is she screaming all the time? Like, she's constantly mad. And then towards the end of the book, you realize like, oh right, all these dudes are like little children. You know, all these dudes are little kids, and Moiraine is this like crazy Aes Sedai person, which, you know, we don't really trust all that much, who takes these kids off on an adventure. And Nynaeve, being the oldest, most responsible person, is obviously the person who has to come and has the duty of bringing them back. But, you know, because of what Moiraine says in that one town. So that being said, I do get why a lot of their characters are drawn the way they are. I will say that Nynaeve and Lan's relationship comes off as like the weirdest unnecessary thing in the Wheel of Time books. It just suddenly happens. You're like, what? They're together? They're like an item? Whereas in the show, it's done more, I think, well in terms of building their relationship up from being enemies and untrustworthy to one another to, although it's like a sort of fast build, it's at least a build, you know, that they begin to understand one another more and more and more, and really well done. The series does a really good job of like the episode 4 showing like Loghain's character, the battle at Gildan, him getting relieved of his powers, whereas in the books you don't even get to see that happen in the first book. Basically he's still like a, you know, he's still like super happy, cheerful, being paraded along the streets of Caemlyn. No gain like Loghain, you know what I'm saying? So I love that character as well, and I think they did a really good job of depicting his character in season 1, like this sort of menacing personality, and really showing what a male Aes Sedai channeler is, or not Aes Sedai, a male channeler is fully capable of, you know, this incredible power. Because Saidar and Saidin are very different, and then Saidin is like, you know, much more energy packed, it's much more powerful, whereas Saidar is much more fluid. Because we don't really see many instances where Saidin is activated in the first book, because Rand doesn't necessarily use it all that much, and mostly we just see Saidar because it's when Egwene or mainly Moiraine is using it. There's this one scene when they're trying to escape a town, and then Moiraine like turns like giant. I'm like, why couldn't we see that in live action? That would have been so freaking cool, man. One good thing about the season 1 being the way it was is that we have a lot of potential to improve the quality of the show going forward, because I will say that season 1 probably most definitely was hindered a lot by first Matt's character leaving, and at the same time a lot of COVID issues, so I'll give them like a lot of that impacted the nature of their development and how they changed their story aspect of it as well. In one aspect I think they improved the story was that they just had Moiraine and Rand go to the Eye of the World as opposed to the other characters, because in the book when they went there, they didn't really have much to do. It's like it was just more Moiraine fighting what was it, Agenor and Balthamel. There were like 3 freaking Forsaken, man, in the first book, because like the first 2 of them just randomly show up when they're at the Eye of the World, which reminds me, I would have loved to see the Green Man. When they go to the Eye of the World, the whole crew, the whole fellowship go to the Eye of the World. There was this character there called the Green Man, right? And he's pretty much the embodiment or the defender of the Eye of the World itself, which is like this cave within like a mountain place, which was built by male and female Aes Sedai put together. And the Green Man is like its protector. Honestly, I thought the Green Man, in my mind, looked like if you mixed the Swamp Thing with Captain Planet. In my mind, that's what the Green Man was. And the way he's depicted in the graphic novel, I'm like, holy shit, I was right. This was literally the Swamp Thing mixed with Captain Planet. It's funny because like the way they displayed the Eye of the World in the TV show, I thought looked cool, but apparently when Rand goes to the Eye of the World, it's basically what they see as a pool of Saidin. Right? I think that's what it was, right? A pool of Saidin, under which is like the Horn of Valir, right? As well as the Quindiar, which is supposed to be, if it's broken, it's one of the many pieces that are responsible for caging the Dark One, or Shaitan, which is funny because in Islam the name of the devil is Shaitan, or Satan or Satan. It's basically that same thing. They literally name drop him as being the literal embodiment of all evil in the Wheel of Time books. But obviously for, I guess, religious reasons, they couldn't call it Shaitan in the series, so they just call him the Dark One, so whatever. I think the Eye of the World, was the way it was described in the books was much better than the way it's described in the series, which is much more of a dark, gloomy environment. Whereas the Blight, holy shit, the Blight looked so much different in the show compared to what it was described in the books. In the books, the environment looks very similar to what it normally does, but there are these weird like worm-like creatures that pop out of the ocean and shit, and like it looks nasty as freak. Like there literally looks like this energy field from like leaves and grass that could sort of do a whole lot of damage. You literally can't touch shit in the Blight, whereas in the TV show it ended up being the sort of obstacle course of weeds and overgrown weeds and vines that you sort of have to go through. That being said, I like the actor who played I am assuming Balsamon. I'm guessing that dude was Balsamon or Shamael, whatever the fuck you want to call him. But I thought his portrayal of the villain was way better than the portrayal of Balsamon in the books. Balsamon is overdone, is over exaggerated in the books. He comes off as this villain sort of character, is like, it's like, I destroy you. He's like over the top, even more than like Emperor Sidious. Like Emperor Sidious has this, it's like, yes, the hate flow through it. Balsamon is way above that. He's like, it's like, join me or I shall kill you or some bullshit like that, and he's got like fire coming out of his eyes because like, I guess he's afraid to show his face. Like, it's just funny, man. But I hope we get to see a lot more of his character in the future, because he has this like crazy prologue scene in the beginning of book 2 as well. So I would love it if book 2 started off like that. Please let us get that Loose There and Telamon prologue one day soon, you know, in season 2. I would love it if we got that, because I need to see that prologue. That prologue is so good, bro, so good. Obviously the TV show cut down a lot of the traveling, because TV watchers, we don't want to see people traveling the whole time. We need shit to happen. But I don't think that the TV series we needed to go to Tar Valon, even though while I was watching it, I even as a viewer, I was like, yeah, I want to see more Aes Sedai, I want to see more Aes Sedai politics. But now that I have read the books, right, now that I have much more perspective, I have a perspective from having read the books, yeah, we should have just taken our time with this shit, you know? Let us go to Caemlyn. I want to have our anime moment with our freaking princess waifu that exists over there. You know what I'm saying? I love my animes. I love my animes waifus. I like, you know, I think of Moiraine as a waifu. Egwene not so much, but a freaking Elaine was totally anime waifu material, and I was like so happy. I'm like reading the Great Hunt. Oh shit, she's in Tar Valon too. Holy crap, that is so freaking good. I want to see more Elaine. I want to see more. I want to see actually more gays. The ultimate Wheel of Time MILF. Give me that MILF. You know, I want to see the ultimate. I want to see more gays in live action, man. And of course Elaine. I think I saw a picture of Elaine's casting, which I looks fantastic. I think they picked great actors to play Elaine, but she is anime waifu material. You know what I'm saying? I would love to see Wheel of Time transformed into an anime, like a 25 episode anime. Give me that shit. So Crunchyroll, Funimation, Sony Entertainment Japan. Give me that shit. I really like the Eye of the World book. There's a lot of problems, I think, you know, in terms of pacing. I was very slow at certain moments. You know, that you have all these characters going on different adventures. Rand's on this ship with Bale Doman or some pirate crew, and then meanwhile like going with Elias and journeying around with them. They all meet together. Actually, the ways, the gate of the ways is actually located in like right after Caemlyn. You know what I'm saying? So they go through the waits there, not outside of freaking Tar Valon. So there are a whole lot of changes that they made. Freaking before anything, freaking Min, the character of Min. Holy shit, dude. When I was reading the books, I'm like, wait, that's Min? Wait, and I rewatched the series, the scene with Min in the TV show. I'm like, wait, these two men, in my mind, look nothing alike. You know, I don't care that Min is Asian. Min could be Asian, but I want Min to be like small, petite, like a little tiny girl. You know what I'm saying? Like, she just comes up, Rand's like in this town. She randomly pops up and starts talking this weird fortune-telling shit. It's like, I can see shit about you. You know, you got these like 2-3 pretty girls around you or some shit, and I knew that Rand's gonna get all the bitches. Remember when I was watching episode 7, I was like, yeah, this fool's gonna get all the bitches. Min already sees 3 chicks around Rand. I'm like, damn, Randall Thor. But all that being said, I do think that the TV show made a very good attempt at adapting. I think it is a adaptation, not the adaptation. I think that to do the adaptation for the Wheel of Time, it would ultimately need to be turned into an anime, preferably something like Arcane. You know, Arcane's animation. I think Arcane, like that type of animation in a 9-episode format, would have done wonders for the Wheel of Time series, or even just a Japanese form of anime would have been great. But I think their attempt was a good, honest attempt, and I think the first half of the season was really well done. I think the second half, where it deviated the most from the book, was when it sort of like fell apart. And I didn't like the fact that, you know, Egwene, you know, brought Nynaeve back, sort of had this dual Deus Ex Machina moment. At the end, it sort of depreciates the value of the one power and what certain characters are capable of, because when death becomes the sort of thing that's playful and easy to come back from. I know that the series directors, like, you know, oh yeah, Nynaeve was never dead, she was just very badly injured. But you know, each episode only has like one first impression. You kind of have to like, don't give her the freaking burn marks. Maybe let us see that she is breathing, and then Egwene is healing her. You know, not like a crazy thing. How I would have done the last scene and make it closer to the books is show that Rand is fighting against Balsamon, you know, at the Eye of the World, but at the same time have him be in multiple places at once. Let Balsamon transport him to like his like vision wise into the battlefield, you know, into the battlefield. Let him see visions of his mother, Kai. I forgot what his adopted mother's name is, but Balsamon basically shows him a couple of visions at the when they're having their final battle, right? But I would have loved it if it was Rand who destroyed the Trolloc army, like the way he did in the books. You know, let's have all the female Aes Sedai. They're like, you know, they're firing their lightning blast. All the soldiers are fighting with them, as opposed to getting like wrecked on that, you know, Helm's Deep sort of place in that wall. But you know, they're all fighting together. Oh, they can't do it. It's like, you know, the army's about to take them over, and then Rand, while being there in like astral projected form, sees his friends, you know, dying, and then he summons the One Power. And even though he's not physically there in the battlefield, he's at the Eye of the World, he can summon lightning and stalagmites and like unleashing and destroying the whole army, and everybody's like, whoa, who the freak saved us? And then, you know, maybe it's Egwene sees like a little ghostly form of a Rand actually on the battlefield, you know what I'm saying? But then he disappears because his vision of that location disappears, and he's back at the Eye of the World, and pretty much sends Balsamon packing. But that being said, I'm still very excited for the Wheel of Time. I am excited for the Wheel of Time, for the series, and also continuing the books, because I have both mediums to act on, and I think they will get better. I think they will get better at adapting the books over time. I really have high hopes for that, especially with the casting of Elaine that I just saw. It's like, wow, they're doing well, and I think I can't wait to see where they go from here on out, and I can't wait to see where the books go from here on out. So I really like the Eye of the World book. It did I'd have a lot of pacing issues, I think, but I think the way I'm reading The Great Hunt right now, The Great Hunt is paced much more better. So I think the books will get better over time, and I absolutely love the characters. I like the actors. I do have my issues with, you know, some stuff here and there, but you know, I can learn to agree with them. You know what I'm saying? And I think I have a much more tolerant perspective on it because I watched the show first before jumping into the books. I think if it was the other way around, I would have been much more judgmental, like a lot of you, towards the series. But having done it the reverse way, I do appreciate the series that much more. Especially, I'm very grateful to it because it introduced me to this new fantasy world that, you know, I can dive into, and that's pretty much what I've been doing. Like, if you guys have been on my channel, I haven't been posting that very many videos, simply because most of my spare time has gone to just reading these books, you know what I'm saying? So I'm very much looking to reading more and being dealt more learned about these characters, and of course the freaking lore, man. The lore is so good, bro. This lore, I'm a whore for lore, as I've said a number of times, and I love the deep and nutritious and juicy lore that we get throughout the series of the Eye of the World, throughout the story of the Eye of the World, little tidbits, little morsels, you know, that we get. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing how the series progresses, how these books progress, and I'll definitely share more of my thoughts about the books going forward. And of course, stay tuned, because I'll be reacting to season 2 when it airs, hopefully later this year. No, next year. I think it'll air probably next year, but I'll be uploading my reactions to the future books as I complete them. So yeah, I know my review of this is sort of like all over the place, but I'll try to put it together in a good, concise ways. But anyways, what did you guys think? Leave your comments down below. Did you guys agree with some of the stuff that I said, or did you disagree with them? Leave down in the comments below as well. If there's something that you guys would like to know my opinion on specifically, I can do another video. Like, I'm happy to do another video on like how I think that the episode 8 should have gone. But yeah, I'm not really used to making those types of videos, but yeah, I thought that, you know, since I made a promise of reading the Eye of the World and jumping into future books, that I had, you know, obligation to actually come up with this video and share my thoughts with you guys. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys are having a wonderful day or a wonderful night wherever you guys are. I'll see you guys later in the next video. Peace. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video and would like to see more like it, please subscribe, hit that like button, and feel free to share the video, and I'll see you guys next time.